So today I'm going to talk a little bit about buying property in Thailand, whether it's a condo, which is what a great deal of number of people buy in Thailand, like in Phuket, Bangkok, Chonburi, and then townhouses, sometimes in the surrounding areas, along with standalone units, houses in the neighborhoods, along with in rural areas, buying property, those kind of things. So let me tell you some things from the beginning. I first arrived into Thailand in 2007. I took a visit out to Thailand based on a recommendation from some friends. And a friend and I, we both went to Thailand for our first time in 2007. Now, in 2007, on our very first trip, the friend that was traveling with me, he decided immediately within like the first 10 days of being there, he just was amazed at how great Thailand was and decided that he wanted to buy a property. And the first thing I can tell you and would highly recommend to you about buying property in Thailand is if this is your first trip or first year or first few visits into Thailand, you're so much better off just waiting, getting used to Thailand, understanding how things operate, the systems that are in place, the pitfalls that are everywhere when it comes to buying real estate and buying property in Thailand. We go to Thailand, we go to the beaches, go to the markets, the people are friendly, the culture is amazing, and we immediately fall in love with all the things that make Thailand great. And the first two things that pop into people's mind is buying property or starting a business or both. And so the friend that was traveling with me, he immediately jumped on board in buying a piece of property, buying a condo basically. We looked at houses, we looked at townhouses, we looked at condominium units, and he ended up on his very first trip buying a condominium unit. Um, he made a number of what I call newbie mistakes. And he was very, very lucky and very, very fortunate that he didn't get taken to the cleaners and bad things didn't happen because he really set himself up to massively fail and have major problems. He did have some issues and problems, but he was able to pretty much go the entire process from beginning to end and not too much scathe in terms of the property purchase. Now, you want to slow things down. People go to Thailand, and before they know it, they want to move to Thailand, they want to visit it regularly. The two things that pop into most people's minds is buying property and starting a business. And you really need to pull back the reins and just kind of take a moment to pause and really understand how things work in a different country. And by doing that and giving yourself time to get acclimated, you'll make some proper decisions that are more thought out and instead of a kind of a knee jerk reaction and just jumping in with basically no idea what to do. So let me kind of go back to my friend's situation back in 2007. So immediately he just came across a random person at a restaurant. He had a real estate shirt on, and he had them show him property around Thailand, the location we were in, Chonburi. And didn't realize during that period of time that the company he represented, first of all, it would not exist a couple years later. They weren't a reputable company. They only were working for themselves and what their goals were. And the problem in Thailand is there's so many real estate companies, and majority of them are not that reputable. They're kind of fly by night companies. You got expats who are basically, they fell in love with Thailand, moved to Thailand, and started a real estate company or got a job with a real estate provider. And there are far more real estate companies that are not on the up and up in Thailand than there are that are reputable. Here in the States, in the UK, in Europe, Australia, a lot of the real estate companies, the major ones that are the major players in those countries, they're reputable. People know about them. There's a history of the services and the structure and the infrastructure that's set up within the company to be successful. In Thailand, there's not a lot of rules and regulations. Companies come and go. There's not a streamlined system. You know, if you don't know or know the processes or know which questions to ask, nobody is really there on your behalf to make sure that you're protected and safe. So my friend, he ran into a real estate agent at the restaurant, basically hired him to show him around. Um, the one thing I do remember about this whole process is the guy was fairly new. He didn't really know a lot of the surrounding areas, so he basically only took him to areas that he knew about. And he didn't have to, at his disposal a lot of properties that were not on the multiple listing sites, and so he only showed them a limited selection of those units. So the knowledge was not there. Secondly, we started looking at units that were the highest commissioning units for this real estate seller. And those are basically new projects. There are so many real estate construction companies in Thailand. I mean, they are just building them right and left as fast and as quickly as they possibly can. One of the biggest no-nos of buying property, and especially condominiums and townhouses in Thailand, is not to buy off plan. Buying off plan is so dangerous in Thailand, places like Mexico and other countries where they don't have a lot of rules and regulations in place. Buying off plan means you're buying a new construction where the property has not been built yet, and you're paying a deposit and paying along the way with the hope that the project gets completed, that they don't run out of money, that it's a reputable company, they don't have any snags like what's happening currently on the beach, where the project got halted for zoning and construction rules and regulations that were broken, and the project actually is never going to get finished. And so those individuals who put deposits down on their property are not going to get the money back. And then currently right now there's a company called the Nordic Group, and they've built a lot of properties here. Um, Even if I was looking to buy a property, I probably would not buy a new property off plan even with a company as reputable as Nordic, just because of all the pitfalls in Thailand. And just last month, the Nordic Group actually filed for bankruptcy. Of course, most of us did not know that COVID was going to happen, but a lot of these companies, they make the commissions or they make the profit off of off these new condominium units, and whether the project gets completed or not, it's not really their concern. They'll go ahead and move on to the next project. They'll go bankrupt, start a new company. There's a lot of ways around that, and there's a lot of scrupulous, you know, un, basically people who just don't have the best interest of the buyers. And so one of the biggest things I can recommend is never to buy off plan, because there are so many projects that got started. They took the money from the buyers, and then the project never got completed. They ran off with the money. The project never got completed. There were zoning issues. There was building issues. They ran out of money. But then the developers, the owners of the project, whoever are the top guys, they pocketed the money and they're gone. And so one of the biggest no-nos in Thailand is not to buy off plan. There's just too much risk involved in that. Another issue that my friend faced when buying the property was he didn't really know how the processes work. There's not really any ways to get loans in Thailand because they just don't provide loans to foreigners, so you have to pay 100% in cash. Now, most of us foreigners, when we first go to Thailand and we're not familiar with how real estate purchases work, we don't understand how to deal with the land office. We don't understand how to confirm that the title is legit. We don't understand how the payment streams work, who's holding on to the money, what are our recourses if the project stalls, how to confirm that the paperwork that's in Thai is legit, that we're actually making deposits and the property is actually going in our name, that it's not being manipulated and put in somebody else's name, Thai name, and they're going to go ahead and keep the property. I mean, there's so many pitfalls in this. Now, my friend got very lucky. He got unscathed in terms of the purchase. Some of the bigger items that he could have got taken for didn't happen. But, I just recently bought a condo. Another one. I've bought and sold many condos over the years. I just recently purchased another unit just in October. And unlike my first two condos, I actually did hire a lawyer on my behalf to double check, triple check, make sure everything was on the up and up. The paperwork was legit. It was done properly. All the steps were taken, and everything was done efficiently. The first two condo units that I bought, I didn't do that, and I was lucky that I got lucky and I wasn't taken to the cleaners or someone didn't steal my property. My friend who bought his condo, he did not pay a law firm to look at the paperwork on his behalf and double check the individuals who were selling the units. And on my recent purchase, I hired a law firm here in town. Um, and I hired them through recommendations. They came highly recommended by everybody around town, but I had heard about them for a number of years, and they are 100% reliable, 100% safe. They're honest, hardworking. They don't cut any corners. They're not just pocketing the fees, the lawyer fees, and not doing the due diligence. They went above and beyond the service, along with going the extra steps to double check everything, and also provided information and insights, along with providing feedback of things that maybe I didn't think about at the time that needed to be, asked by the seller, or by the mortgage company, or by the realtor, by the the real estate agent, by the company. All those questions that needed to be answered. The law firm that I hired did the proper work. I believe I paid. I want to say I paid 15,000 baht for the service. I think that's about $500. Maybe I paid 20,000. So I'll double check and report back later. But I paid somewhere between $500 to $600 for that service, and that's a very small price to pay, especially in a country like Thailand, to have somebody covering me, watching my back, basically. So going back to my friend's situation, he bought a condominium, a brand new project off plan, and which is dangerous because a lot of projects just never get completed here in town. People pocket the money and disappear, or they just go bankrupt, and then you're out all that money. Then on top of that, there's a lot of delays in Thailand, whether it's Thailand or places like the Philippines or Mexico. They can go ahead and show you the paperwork and the fancy brochures, but there's just constant delays, issues with zoning, issues with permits, issues with electrical and plumbing done properly, being inspected properly, using proper materials, not using lead paint. All these things that you just take for granted here in the States and Europe and the UK, you can't really take for granted here in a place like Thailand. Now, this isn't to scare you and say that a great deal of projects aren't done properly, because they are. There are a lot of projects done properly, a lot of honest companies, a lot of other things, but there's also quite a few that just don't do things, and some of them aren't doing it to scam or cheat the customers. They just aren't a very well run business, and so these things kind of fall by the wayside. And so, typically for most of us, it would be prudent for us to buy on plan, meaning that the property has already been built. You can physically see it. You can physically inspect it. You can get a outside company to come in and inspect your property and make sure that the plumbing is good, the electrical is good, there's not water damage behind the walls, the windows aren't leaking water when it has heavy rain. Want to make sure that there isn't leaks already happening in your upper roof. That happened to me. I also had a leak in in my washing machine room that was leaking down below. All these things I didn't have checked properly, and ended up costing me money. I was lucky that I caught it early, and it didn't become a real expensive ordeal for me. But you want to hire a proper law firm to help you with the paperwork. They'll take care of the land office. They'll take care of the taxes. They'll make sure the deed is properly in the right name, that the person who's selling the unit has the legit right to sell it. You want to make sure there's no liens on your property. And when you're in a foreign country, and especially when it comes to real estate and these type of transactions, most of the work is done by Thai individuals and companies, and sometimes you can't come across somebody who speaks English. And I've known people who didn't know what they were signing with all the paperwork that's in the Thai language. And so hire a proper law firm, have them protect you, cover your back, and then take your time. You know, people seem to be in such a hurry in Thailand. They come here on vacation, they're laying on the beach, they're talking to individuals, they're bouncing around town. They start falling in love with the place, and without looking at location, looking at bus routes, travel routes, what's the security like in the neighborhood? Are they close to grocery stores? Are they in a good area that'll be a good area 5, 10 years down the road? What are the roads like? What's the traffic like? You know, all these things you can't really pick up on until you've been here for a while or you know the area pretty well. You can't necessarily just turn to your real estate agent and know that they have has your back and ask them, "Hey, how are the roads in this area? Is there a lot of traffic in the morning or the afternoon? Are they going to go ahead and put something in here that's going to clog up the traffic? During the rainy season, are the roads going to flood? How's the sewage system for the building?" You know, all these things, a lot of these things can be answered by individuals who've been here a long time or have contacts that will, you'll be able to hire the right people, the right individuals. You'll be able to talk to people who've lived in the building and get a good feel for what's a good location, what are reputable builders. A lot of times you won't know until 3 to 5 years later on a property if it's been well constructed. There's a lot of condominium units on the brochures. They looked amazing. And then within 2, 3 years, you walk into a unit and they have particle board as furniture. They have leaks coming through the walls from the ceilings. The seals are breaking off. Cheap doors. The balcony sliding doors. All the seals are melted off and broken. The air conditioner units were very poor quality, and they have to have those replaced. I mean, I've heard so many horror stories of properties that were bought brand new and started falling apart within 3 to 5 years. And I also know of new units after, the property's been completed and someone moves in 1 to 3 years later where they don't realize right away that, hey, the unit's not in a good location. The unit is poorly constructed. Things are falling apart. So it's a good idea when you first come to Thailand, or if you're new to the real estate purchasing, buying a condo, buying a house, buying a townhouse, buying land, that you take your time, get used to the country. Things work and operate slowly and differently here in Thailand. You have to be 100% safe, 110% safe on your side, because nobody else out there is going to protect you. Pay the little bit of extra money, hire a law firm that's reputable to look at the paperwork and help you with the ins and outs. Talk to expats who bought in property. Make sure that whoever you hire to inspect, whoever you hire for a real estate agent, whoever you hire for a lawyer, whoever you hire to do the work, that you don't just take their word for it, that they're able and capable and able to do the work. A lot of times, I've had finish work individuals, people who did maintenance on my air conditioner units, fixed little holes, fixed minor details issues that popped up, and they promise that they can do the work and they know it, they sound professional, and then when it comes to getting the work, you basically get third country world type quality craftsmanship. And so, with my previous condominium units, when I've had to update, upkeep, or repair something, a lot of times I just hired somebody that somebody recommended that I didn't know very well, or I didn't know the person they recommended. I didn't understand that they were getting a cutback or commission. They were recommending their friend. Didn't know the craftsmanship they did. Didn't realize that a lot of Thai people who do a lot of the work, they do it at the Thai standard, which is not what us here in the West or people in Europe and the UK, are accustomed to. And so you really have to protect yourself. And so if you've been here for a couple years, you've gotten the lay of the land, You spent time in Bangkok. You spent time up north in Udon Thani, Chiang Mai. You spent time down south in Phuket, Krabi, Koh Samui. Travel around Thailand, get a lay of the land, figure out, do you like the big city? Do you like rural places? Do you like the mountainside? Do you like the countryside? Do you like the beach? Do you like to live in populous areas? Do you want more rural areas? Do you want a lot of shoppings? Do you want a place that has no shopping malls? Do you want a place that has at least one shopping mall? Do you want to be in downtown Bangkok where there's a shopping mall on every block? I mean, these are kind of things you won't know until you've lived here. Then, on top of that, get a feel for whether or not you truly love Thailand and if it makes sense to buy a piece of property here. For most people buying property here, you have to understand that real estate does not appreciate very quickly in most locations in Thailand. You can buy a property and then 1, 3, 5, 10 years later, you may not be able to sell it very quickly. The reason for that is they're constantly overbuilding here in Thailand. So there's just a glutton amount of available units to purchase. And when it comes to selling, there's just so many people who want to get out, but just can't find a buyer. And so with them building new properties and the existing properties that are on the marketplace, it is a buyer's market. And then on top of that, for the people who are trying to sell and get out, it takes a long time most often to move a property. And then on top of that, when you're selling your property, there's a number of pitfalls and other things that are associated with that. I won't get into it today, but a lot of us, whether we're from the States or from Europe or the UK, we buy property and we think, okay, we hold it for 1, 3, 5, 10 years from now. I'm going to make a pretty good profit. It's a good investment. Well, you can't get into buying property here in Thailand and assume that it's for investment real estate purposes, because majority of real estate here, they actually don't appreciate very quickly or very well. And so if you're only buying it as for investment purposes with possibly using it occasionally once or twice, maybe 3 times a year, it may not be financially feasible or smart to buy a piece of property, buy a condo, buy a townhouse, buy a house here in Thailand. The appreciation rate for most properties in most regions aren't very good. Now, let's get beyond the person who's investing or who's buying to use but also investing. Let's talk about people like me, where I've worked on and off here in Thailand. I also don't mind spending a little bit of money to have a place called home. Coming and going, doing a little work, having a place to store my clothes, my suitcase. The fact that I like my own personal stuff. I'm coming here for minimum 30 to 90 days for each trip. I realized living in a studio apartment, renting a condo, doing a timeshare, doing an Airbnb, there's just been a number of times where I've done that, and I just don't, at the end of the day, I just don't enjoy not having my own place. And so when I finally made the leap and ended up buying my first condo, I realized, hey, I can't buy it assuming or hoping that I get appreciation from this and that it's going to be a form of investing, because you got to kind of shove that out of the window. For a majority of us, it's not going to appreciate well enough where we can justify the purchase based on appreciation and rate of return of that being the sole reason of buying a property. For myself and people who are living here for a period of time, having our own place is important. Now, keep in mind, rents here in Thailand are very, very, very affordable. You can get something super dirt cheap, pay as little as $4,000 or 5,000 baht per month, $150 to $250 per month, and the sky's the limit, right? You can buy places in Bangkok for where you're spending $5,000 to $10,000 a month. But you get outside of Bangkok, and whether it's Phuket, Chiang Mai, Udon Thani, Krabi, Chonburi, there's a wide gamut price range of properties available to purchase. For a lot of people, it would behoove them to rent or do an Airbnb or extended stay or a serviced apartment, and get a feel for the neighborhood that you're interested in. Live in a bunch of different places. Get an idea of, do you like in Bangkok? Do you want to live in a souk? Do you want to live in Thong Lo? Do you want to live right on the heart of Sukhumvit? Where do you like to go shopping, eating, grocery stores? So get a lay of the land first. And then for those individuals who've been here for a while, they kind of know where they are looking for properties. You got to decide, hey, do I want to buy a condo? Do I want to buy a townhouse? Do I want to buy a standalone unit? Do I want to buy land and build my own house, which, has its own issues that you'll have to deal with? I won't get into that in this video. But there's a lot of decisions you need to make. And when it comes to condominium units, we as foreigners can buy condominium units. As long as the building is 51% owned by Thais, we can buy the condominium units. Do not pay a bribe. Do not glance quickly over the paperwork. Make sure someone else looks at it. Make sure that the property you're buying is within those specs, because if you pay somebody off or you buy the property without really looking at the paperwork, and you actually as a foreigner can't buy that property because it's not within the code range of the building being 51% owned by Thais, they could actually take that property away from you or nullify that purchase. And so it's very important to be on top of that. Now, for most of us foreigners who are living in big metropolitan areas, yes, we do buy condominiums. They are plentiful, and as long as you're doing the due diligence and hiring the proper lawyer and asking the right questions, not a problem buying a condominium. Now, when it comes to buying standalone units, yes, on the surface and within the base rules of the law, foreigners cannot own land. Okay, there are some ways around that. Okay, now for a lot of my friends, they're either married to a Thai guy or like gal, or they have a Thai girlfriend, or they have a business, or they own a company, and they can buy the property. Either the wife or the girlfriend can buy the property. And of course, I'm not. Those are things that are personal issues, and I won't get into that too much. But you'll deal with those issues. Do you trust the person you're with? Are you married, not married? Is this a lifelong relationship? What happens if you get divorced? What happens if you break up and the property is in the guy's or girl's name, Thai person's name? Those are all kind of things that you'll have to deal with. But those are things, those are options available to you. So if you want to buy land or you want to buy a standalone unit house, we're not allowed as foreigners to buy property. But if we're married to a Thai girl or Thai guy, we're going to have a girlfriend and we're okay with putting it in their name, we can get that property. Also, if you're working and living here in Thailand and you set up a company, a corporation, the corporation can buy that property. It gets a little bit tricky with the paperwork and those kind of things, where you need to dot the I's and cross the T's. You're definitely going to have to hire a law firm and hire a lawyer who understands this process, can do the paperwork, that you have a legit business, that it's not a fake business. Make sure that everything's on the up and up, and then yes, you can buy the property in a foreign quota, a foreign title entity property name. And so there are ways to buy a standalone unit or buy land and build a house on top of that land. And so if that's the route you want to go, you can do that. For majority of us in big metropolitan sprawling areas, beach resort areas, most of us just buy condos. And as long as you're prudent, you do the due diligence, you ask the right questions, you slow down, and hire reputable people, you'll be safe and sound. And so hopefully this helps. And if you have questions for me, I'm not a real estate agent. I want to be forthright and be very clear. I'm not an expert. I'm not giving legal advice. I'm not saying something is a certain. But, after buying half a dozen properties over the years and being out here since 2007, I've seen and done a lot. And so if you have some basic questions, feel free to put a message down below and I'll try to help you out. Thailand's a great place, a wonderful place. If you haven't been there, hopefully you come for a visit. Just make sure you don't get in a hurry. Don't do the three things for foreigners. Don't buy property right away. Don't start a business right away or buy a business right away. And don't get in a relationship right away. Don't be in such a hurry. Enjoy your holiday, enjoy your travels, and hope to see you in Thailand soon. Talk to you guys later.